So we hope that family, Brother Eric. We want to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, also known as African Helping Africans and Mackeys to the Third. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Brother Hassar, Gil Noble, the late great attorney Alton Maddox, El Haj Malik El Shaddai, Louis Ray Rivera, Minister Khaled, Amos Wilson, Renovo Rashidi, Professor George Simmons, and all the historians who gave us fame and fortune, Chancellor Williams, because they chose to bring information. They didn't have to go the route that they did. Minister Malcolm Trump didn't have to, he didn't drink the Kool-Aid. He could have accepted the money and went the other way, because they tried to pay him off. In honor of Miss Leola Maddox and the United African Movement. Worked in Teaneck, New Jersey, had an old car. And she would come from Teaneck in that car, and she would eat her dinner at the UAM because she believed in elections. We never want to forget the great work of Miss Leola Maddox and the United African Movement. So we meet here every other Wednesday for a live audience. For the people that's here, give yourself a great big hand who came out and supported the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, because they believed in coming out. So we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. This is the Amos collection. We have these books in honor of Amos Wilson. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We have The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat for the Reclamation of the African Mind. We have Black-on-Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. Amos's classic, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children. The Falsification of African Consciousness. Issues of Manhood in Black and White. African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order. Louis Ray Rivera, Jazz in Jail. S.K. Damian, Distorted Truths, The Bastardization of African Cosmology. And Earl Ponder, Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses. So in honor of Louis Ray, ladies and gentlemen, Black-on-Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. In this book, you hear everybody, big city mayors, congresspeople, how the CIA funds different black groups to go up against each other. Black-on-black violence, crime in the street. Not crime in the suites, but crime in the streets. So we have this book. Nobody talks about it. It says, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. So what it basically means is we are still dominated. Our minds are still dominated. That's why Sababu came out with the latest book, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. This is an Amos doubleheader, because our mind is still in trouble. So we want to salute Amos and Brother Sababu for these books. In honor of Louis Ray Rivera, bring the camera in to Louis Ray. Louis Ray Rivera used to come down here when Professor Mackey made his transition, and he would speak for hours. And after he took up the mantle, and after he would speak, We would walk him home and he would still talk for another hour and a half. We never want to forget the good work of Louis Ray Rivera in his classic Jazz and Jazz. Thank you, Louis Ray. So, we have some other books that we want the listening audience to purchase. We have a few here, and you can buy them on thrift books, Amazon, aid books, and you can get them and do your studies. So, we have, in honor of Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed, Dr. Randy Short's classic. We also have, in honor of Big Harry, Brother Assad, Trust, The Transfer Agreement, The Untold Story of the Secret Pact Between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. This is in honor of Big Harry. We also have, I wound up picking this book up, and it tells you how powerful Washington is. Go quietly, or else. Spiro Agnew, his own story of the events leading to his resignation. And I just happened to be scrolling along, and this book was sitting in the street. Somebody threw it away. And I wound up picking it up, and Mackie used to talk about how they do things. This is another blockbuster, and I ain't started reading it yet. The Unspoken Alliance, Israel's secret pact, secret relationship with apartheid South Africa. And they control the diamonds in South Africa. And this is, pick this up from Amazon. So if you want to tell Jeff Bezos to stop selling books, he ain't gonna do it. You can get any book you want on Amazon, and ain't nobody gonna tell him to stop selling anything. In honor of the great Dr. Ben, black man of the Nile and his family. They didn't have too many computers, and Dr. Ben laid stuff out. Volumes and volumes of what went on. Different heads of state. The pyramids. We want to salute Dr. Ben because this book right here will take years of study, but this will let you know when Dr. Ben's work is impeccable. Everybody's talking about reparations. You hear it all the time. But this classic, Without Sanctuary, Lynching Photography in America, and it shows you the lynchings. Put the camera up here, the crowds, the postcards that was given out, the hangings of black folks, and some white folks too. Bringing them up too.
In the vines, usually are.
In Ohio, the dogs, the whippings, the postcards, and nobody wants to recognize what the African American had to do in this country. And ain't a damn soul talking about some kind of immigrant or migrant. The dogs, the ropes, the killings. And when they ask for reparations, they still want to have a study. They haven't looked at this book. What is wrong? Paid a big price in this country, and they're trying to replace us because nobody will make no noise. Professor Mackey used to say, we are the glue. We're the people that bring stuff up that other people don't want to talk about. They just want to be happy they're here. Ain't nobody put a rope around their necks, stick the dog on them, whip them. I was walking and I found this book by Herbert Klein and Ben Venso, 3 African Slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean. This book happened to be in a garage sale I was walking past, and I picked this up. So I haven't looked at it yet, but it's African slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean. Like it didn't happen there. A social history of Europeans, Terry McLaughlin, Dirt. It tells you about the history of the umbrella. How they used to throw the waste out of the windows and you had to cover your head. So they created the umbrella so the waste wouldn't hit you in the head while you were walking down the street. It's called dirt. In honor of Truss and Louis Ray Rivera, Jews, God, and History. A lot of stuff was made up. And we want to thank Max Dumont on his book. Truss Graham and Louis Ray mentioned this book, so we have it. Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, Great Issues of the Race from 45 BC to 2000 AD, and if you think everything was together in Africa, you don't know what you're talking about. There was a lot of stuff going on. And Chancellor Williams lays out a lot of the mistakes that we made as a people by letting others come in. And now you see the result of what's happening. Was that the Berlin Conference when they cut up Africa and took pieces for themselves?
Yes, sir.
The Berlin Conference when all these other ethnic groups came in and just sliced up Africa, Aquaman, the land of the black, and just took pieces of their own, and they still control a lot of it. But there's some things changing, and we're going to talk about that later. The manufacturing of a president, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the White House. Wayne Mansfield's classic. And it looked like they getting ready to manufacture somebody else into the White House. That's a fraud and a phony. So this book will give you an insight on how they run things with Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Barack Hussein Obama, amongst other names that he had. Don't get mad at me. You can talk to Wayne Mansfield about it. This book is readily available. Inside the secret network of George Soros, the man behind the curtain and the shadow party, how Soros, Hillary, and 60 radicals seized control of the Democratic Party. Control it lock, stock, and barrel, and some Republicans. He's a bad man. I think his name is William Schwartz. His real name. Ladies and gentlemen, every place you go, you see a weed shop, presidential candidates wanting to legalize marijuana. They rolling up weed in front of everybody. George Soros, we want to thank Lyndon LaRouche. Soros is behind it. And don't get mad at me, you get mad at Lyndon LaRouche because he wrote the book. He has a son named Alex who's getting ready to take over. So all this legalization of marijuana and people just waiting in front of these spots early in the morning. They ain't in front of the liquor store no more, they're in front of the weed spot. And after you smoke it, you used to want a big giant Subway sandwich. You smoke this stuff, you ain't looking for nothing to eat, you're just acting stupid. So they got some new stuff out there, and blacks are smoking it, whites are smoking it, everybody's smoking it. So you can thank our elected officials and all these phony balonies who's pushing this stuff. They ain't giving you no job, but you can get some weed. Dr. Scott Whitaker's classic medicine, the causes and solutions to disease, the malnutrition, and the medical sins that are killing the world. Our good friend, Dr. Scott, he's out of Decatur, Georgia. We have his book, and you can also purchase his book on the internet. And it tells you a whole lot of stuff about the vegan and all this stuff. Capitalism on a Ventilator, the impact of COVID in China and the U.S. I just happened to stroll by and saw this book laying around in a basket, and I picked this up. Edward Down, Causes Unknown, an epidemic of sudden death in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Every time you turn around, something's happening. How are these people falling out and just dropping on the football fields? How is this phenomenon happening? Youngsters, strong youngsters with strong bodies, all of a sudden collapsing. Edward Down, forwarded by presidential candidate Robert Kennedy, who will be definitely getting my vote. The Wuhan cover-up, another Kennedy classic. Terrifying bioweapon and arms race. Kennedy is putting it down. Dr. Brian Hooker, who's a doctor. So if anybody say, well, Kennedy is not a doctor, well, Brian Hooker is a doctor. And facts versus unfacts, let the science speak. Deception, the great cover-up. Rand Paul, the great COVID cover-up. This is a congressional senator, Rand Paul. You can get this book on Amazon. Over 500 pages. Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummings, The Truth About CO-19, exposing the Great Reset, because they're getting ready to come down with the monkey man, the bird man of Alcatraz. The real Anthony Fauci. Robert Kennedy did a good job on Fauci. Get this book because this stuff is not over. And last but not least, in my opinion, the only person that cared about the people of Georgia, our sister Cynthia McKinney. When China sneezes, from the corona lockdown to the global political crisis, Cynthia McKinney. And when Trump was running for office, he said they had these African countries and nations were shithole countries. So Cynthia McKinney wrote a book on how the U.S. creates shithole countries. So before you think about it, you understand what's happening. We want to salute Cynthia McKinney. Ayo Kamati, the irritated genie with his 1-2 punch. Jews are the problem one, and Jews are the problem nine. Psychology of the Jew. Ayo Kamati, and you can get this book on Money Tree Publishing, JewsAreTheProblem.com, and get this book. Ayo Kamati did an excellent job. Other than he had a big book signing down in Baltimore, and we was able to go down and support him on that. So I'm going to give some community events where the listening audience can tune in and log in for yourself. Every Thursday, Thorough Black Talk with Ted, Keisha, Ashe, Brother Black, and Sister Mama, a.k.a. Sister Marcia, that's the hottest show on the East Coast. That comes on Thursdays at 8 o'clock on Facebook. Also, our Philadelphia connection, Sister Empress, Blog Talk Radio. That comes on 10:30 p.m. on Saturdays. And that number is 1319-527-6189. Sister Empress, Brother Lumumba, and the good folks in Philly are doing an excellent job with this show. Ayo Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. That comes on every Monday, WSYP 95.1, Birmingham, Alabama. And you can call into this program and get in on the conversation with Ayo and Brother Anthony Muhammad, and they got an excellent program. Comes on 10 o'clock, 95.1 FM, and they're having, at the Terror Cafe, Saturday, August 17th, they're having a 10th annual Straight Black Pride Convention, African World Revolution, with the irritated genie, Brother Conrad, and Brother Darren Muhammad, talking about Garveyism. This is going to be an excellent program in Baltimore. It's going to be the 17th. And also, on August 10th, the Anti-Sexualization of Children Movement, Parents, Teachers, Saturday, August 10th from 12 to 2, 1450 Mercantile Lane in Largo, Maryland. There's going to be live streaming, and this is going to be, the phone number is 202-308-1250. So Ayo Kamati and a few other organizations will have an excellent program coming down. Also, every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Program Project is excellent program. He was on yesterday, and let me tell you, he started at 7 o'clock, he didn't finish until 9:30. We want to salute Dr. Aline on his information on CO-19, health, and other stuff. He's a bad man, and you can catch him on California radio the next day, and he's doing it up. Also, every Friday at 8 o'clock, the African Echoes family, Brother Trust Graham, Brother Danny and Truanum, they have the psychology of self-hate and self-defeat for the reformation of the African mind. But not only do they give you that, they give you a double-header punch. Also Saturday, the Know Thyself study group with Brother True and the brothers down at Asbury Park. They're doing the destruction of black civilization with Chancellor Williams. The Simultap organization with Dr. James McIntosh and Richard E. Theodore, they program, you must remember, because it's hard to remember, they was coming on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. They changed. The program now comes on Tuesday at 10 o'clock a.m. And Dr. McIntosh had an excellent program on the Haruru movement and had a panel of lawyers speaking on how they came down on the Haruru movement. And also, he was talking about what's going on with that disgusting picture of Good Times by Netflix and how the NFL won't go after one of the $40 million slaves who gave up a whole lot of money for this movie, but they went after Kyrie Irving. So we want to thank Dr. McIntosh. And if you want to know what's going on, tune in to Simultap. They have some stuff going on and protests going on. So you sit, we as African people are steady talking about reparations and what they want to give us and this and that and that and this. And we can't even stop the people from making disgusting movies about us. We can't even stop Hollywood. If you got a problem with the time, you could go on home and just get at home and leave. You don't have to stay here if you got a problem with the time. You could just leave. So, Dr. McIntosh and them has a lot of events going on. So you tune into the Simultap organization and that's what's happening. You can view all the lectures of the B.K. William Mackey Jr. History Club on YouTube. Our Power Pack docu-series that Dr. Lewis is doing on Burkina Faso, and Dr. Lewis on health, and Brother Mike, and Sister Keisha, and everybody. You could go over the lectures and do your research, and that's what this is about. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have one of the founding members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, and he's doing a docu-series. This is not just going to be a 1-2 part, this is going to go on and on. A good friend of the William Mackey Jr. History Club, community cop, ladies and gentlemen, welcome our keynote speaker on the meaning of whiteness in America, part 2. Give him a great big hand, Brother Mike Gray.
What's that? Hotel.
Tap.
Say I am.
I am.
Because we are.
Because we are.
I am.
I am.
Because we are.
Because we are.
Good to be here tonight. You know, this is a good night to be out. Yes, it's inclement weather, but you know, it's something about those who dare to travel out in inclement weather, and that bears attaboys for being able to do such. Tonight, there's quite a few things I want to cover that's different from last time. The last time I did a piece on the meaning of whiteness in America. And I started off, well, there's quite a few things to it, and I'm going to do a quick recap of some things, and then explore some new things that I think we need to know. The first thing want to acknowledge that we had a birthday that I guess we missed, and I miss this person so much. The chairman of the United African Movement, former chairman, Alton Maddox, had a birthday on July 21st, and it bears acknowledgement. Alton Maddox, who chaired the United African Movement, founded it, chaired it, and did so much wonderful work. And yet, this past year when he died, very little acknowledgement from a man so great and did so much for so many. Yet, it was just, for some people, an afterthought to think of Alton Maddox being gone was merely an afterthought. Some people were sort of laissez-faire on the whole thing about Alton Maddox. And then there were those that might have said good riddance. You know, he was an irritant to so many that some people felt that it was no loss, you know, Alton Maddox being gone. And all of them people are not white. We have some black people who felt that it was no great loss to lose Alton Maddox. And some might even say it's a better world without him. Certainly, white supremacists and those who support white supremacy can breathe a little easier knowing that Alton Maddox is not there to challenge the powers that be anymore. But, you know, I'd say in this process that there are some cubs, so to speak, that did learn a thing or two from Alton. And some of us study very well and have information that can always contribute and help in the things that we do. So just want to take a moment just to acknowledge his birthday. And certainly he deserves more. And we didn't get to send him off the way we wanted to. We, meaning the United African Movement. They had a funeral at Abyssinia for him, and I'll just say for the record that a lot of people were in attendance that feel that it's a better place without it. And they were there in full effect. They were a part of the whole process, but it's okay. You know, we're gonna be all right. Just wanted to acknowledge automatics, and that some of us haven't forgotten. So my message to those who love automatics, those who respect his word, we share in that loss. We all share in that loss into all of those who love him. Our battle cry is still no justice, no peace. Now, some of you might think that that's from the National Action Network. You were sadly mistaken. That's from United African Movement. No justice, no peace is from the very lips of Alton H. Maddox Jr. No justice, no peace. Just a little tidbit to those who might not know, and you know, those who think that that's from the National Action Network. That statement has gone all over the world, just in case you don't know. And I'm not talking about all over America, I'm talking about the world. In Europe, when they protest, they say no justice, no peace. In Africa, when they protest, they say no justice, no peace. In the Caribbean, they say no justice, no peace. In Latin America, South America, no justice, no peace. All over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if they said that Tiananmen Square in China, no justice, no peace. I don't know about that, and I don't have a way to confirm that unless I looked at those old tapes. But suffice it to say that all over the world, that saying no justice, no peace is still out there. And to those from the United African Movement, you made an impact all over the world, not just with those words, but with so many other causes and positions that UAM stood for. So, to Alton Maddox, as well as his queen, Leola Maddox, I salute them and give them a hand. You know, I want to just say for the record that when I would speak at UAM, there were two people that would come to me after and shoot straight, and I loved them so much. Both of them have passed. They were both good friends of mine. One is Harold Wilbur, who Ray always mentioned when he talks about the transfer agreement. The other one is James Bryson. Those two stand-up brothers always would pull me after, you know, I would speak and tell me what I missed. They said, for real, they would tell me, you know, look, brother, that was good, but next time you got to mention this. Next time you got to mention that, and that's what they would do. It was a role that they put on themselves to make me better. So it was nothing for me to get mad at. You know, they would say, you know, tell me how well I did, but they would take the time to tell me. I remember once, one thing, I can tell you a few things, but I want to get to the lecture, but I'll tell you this much. You know, there was a time when Reverend Sharpton was fronting that the wire he was carrying on him wasn't for black leadership, when he was carrying a wire around for the FBI. He claimed that, you know, the wire was for drug dealers, specifically La Cosa Nostra, the mafia. That's what he claimed. Somehow, the wire was for a mafia, a close, secret society, where he claimed that he was out to get Vinny the Chin Gigante. So I was talking about that at a UAM lecture. And then after the lecture, James Bryson started telling me all this information on the things that I missed. And I was explaining that in that family, no one was allowed to call his name. So they would point to their chin whenever they wanted to tell you, look, this is coming from the boss. They would do this. They wouldn't say his name. They were not allowed to say his name publicly or even privately. When you wanted to say this from the top, you would just point to your chin. And so after the lecture, James Bryson said to me, well, brother, you know, not only did they point to their chin, he said, you know why they call him the chin? And I said, no, I really don't know why they call him the chin. And he said, because he used to be a boxer. As a kid, he was a boxer. And so that's, you know, Vinny the Chin, that's from the chin because he could take a punch. And so I looked at James Bryson and I said, you always coming up with something, man. You know, but I said, I love you, man. And that was good. So that you know, these are the moments when, you know, you point that out because in African philosophy, if you take that as true, African philosophy says that you should always call out your relatives and your friends, your loved ones, their names, because they are still alive if you call them out. If you don't call out and mention their name, then they lay dormant. So, you know, I wanted to raise not only Alton Maddox and Leola Maddox tonight, but also two real stalwarts in the United African Movement, James Bryson and Harold Wilbur. So with that, I can begin the meaning of whiteness in America, part 2. The meaning of whiteness in America, part 2. A quick recap of part 1 is I started out posing some questions to the audience. And just to get the thinking cap on and to get you started, I asked about the Stone Mountain carvings. And I said that it's just 3 on Stone Mountain, and I won't ask you tonight because I did that a few weeks ago. But anybody, if they wanted to say something, you can feel free to do it. But you know that it's Confederate President who? Jefferson Davis. When you had it, you know, most of the times you know the answers, you just, you know, just not 100% sure. But Jefferson Davis, and of course, Robert E. Lee, and the last one is Stonewall Jackson. You know, Thomas Jackson. These are all generals. So that was because, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I also asked you about Mount Rushmore to get us started, to start thinking about, because the message is the meaning of whiteness in America. So when I asked about Mount Rushmore, it was just 4 names, and most people know the names. Certainly George Washington. These are all presidents, by the way. George Washington. Who? Jefferson? Jefferson, yes. The 16th president. Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, it's only one more, and that's Abraham Lincoln. Now, I didn't explain, I just let y'all give reasons why they were there. But I did say, with respect to Stone Mountain, I said they were all killers. They were vicious. They distinguished themselves as being vicious and about. And that's why the Confederacy has put them up on a pedestal as the top 3 of all time. Now with Mount Rushmore, I'll give the reasons why each of them were there. You don't have to mention why. With George Washington, people gave different answers last time, but I'll say for the record, the one that wasn't mentioned was that he was the one given the credit because of his leadership in beating the British. So in that sense, he established America. Consequently, he's the father of America in that sense. Certainly not our father, but their father. And that doesn't require explanation. He's not our father. He's their father. And also, Thomas Jefferson. What did Thomas Jefferson do to be on Mount Rushmore? Because George Washington, it's obvious, he gave America its independence. He beat the British under his leadership. Now with Thomas Jefferson, he
denied the rule of people, even though he was Benjamin Franklin, corresponding.
Right. Okay, you talking about Thomas Jefferson? Okay, but what caused him to be on Mount Rushmore?
He wrote the deck.
What's that?
He wrote the deck.
Okay, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. There's no question about that. But he did much more. As president now, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and that put him in the upper echelon already. But when he did the Louisiana Purchase, it doubled the size of America. Now, in doubling the size of America, it opened up the West. America was 13 colonies, primarily on the East Coast. So, that Louisiana Purchase, from who? France. So, to do that, you have to remember, America, which was established by the British on the East Coast, France had the middle of the country, all the way from Louisiana, all the way up towards Canada, and in Canada, by the way. And then on the West Coast, you had who? Spain. Consequently, to get the middle of the country, now put you in a position to open up the country. And eventually, America obviously, took the country itself. So now, America became a coastal nation, from coast to coast. Or as the song goes, from sea to shining sea. Because now America was all the way from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And that's one of the major reasons why Thomas Jefferson, that move he made, put him on Mount Rushmore. So things like that. What about Abraham Lincoln? Which we should all be familiar with, some of the things he did. But what puts him on Mount Rushmore, he preserved the Union. He did save the country, you can put it that way. He preserved the Union. It was very important to preserve the Union, and he did that. No other president faced a crisis such as that. In the split that occurred in 1861, And not only was it a split, but it eventually became a war, the Civil War. And inasmuch, he had to make a decision because he provoked the war. Make no mistake about it. When he sent federal troops into Sumter, South Carolina, and South Carolina had already succeeded, it was an act of war. Now, the Confederate States of America was one country, the United States of America was another country. So, for taking that position, and it's just like a bunch of gangsters in a room, and you tell everybody in the room, nobody's leaving the room. Huh? Nobody's leaving the room until we together. Now you can try to fight your way out of the room if you want to, but nobody's leaving the room. And so to have that challenge over his head is what distinguished him. And to this very day, he'll probably always be, because they do these polls every so often, he'll probably still be number one. They have a ranking system in place where they rank, you know, and obviously it's going to vary depending on where you live and where your family's from, because the South is not too fond of Abe Lincoln, but overall he's considered the greatest ever. And last one, as you mentioned, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt definitely put a small dent in at that time in monopoly capitalism. Monopoly capitalism would have been through the roof had it not been for him to break some of that up and then to preserve certain public lands, you know, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, and things like that, which are important. Now, I brought those things up last time, and I went through, you know, I even mentioned the seal of the Confederacy, which was George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Andrew Jackson. The reason I mention those is because those are all symbols. If you want to know the meaning of whiteness, you have to be able to discern symbols, because symbols have an historical meaning. So these symbols are what remain long after that person is gone. The same way our ancestors left symbols, ancient Kemet, and the things that were left there, we can see it 5,000 years later. The very things that Dr. Ben and others brought to us. He gave us that back. He gave us North Africa, you know, he gave it back to us. Because if we went by movies, every time you see a movie on Egypt and all these queens and pharaohs, it's all played by Europeans. So Dr. Ben, to his everlasting credit, Theobald Benga, and so many others that brought that to us, Dr. Carr brought that to us, but the ones who brought it specifically to us, more so than anybody else, is Dr. Ben. So we are eternally indebted to him for doing such. Now, these symbols show, now some of us do argue about statues. Some of us say that Confederate statues and whether they were war heroes, what have you, should be taken down. And I understand these arguments. Some people feel that a statue of an Andrew Jackson, a statue of, what's his name, the gynecologist, Dr. Sims, Yeah, Marion Simmons. Should be taken down. It was taken down in Central Park. You know, it was taken out of Central Park. Now, there are those who say to you, those symbols should not be removed.
Yes.
Now, we understand why white people argue they should not be removed. Some black people feel the same way because it's hiding their dirt if you remove it. Some people want to know what happened, and it was the daughters of the Confederacy, many, many years later, that started erecting all of these statues. The statues that you saw in the early 1900s and the middle 1900s were all done or initiated for the most part by the daughters of the Confederacy. Now this started 30, 40 years later. And some of those Confederate soldiers were dead or on their way. And so it was their women who decided they wanted something to remember. And also you have to remember, some of this was in response to the early civil rights movement. And I'm talking about before the 50s, I'm talking about during the time of Booker T. Washington and others.
Birth of a Nation.
Oh, and Birth of a Nation, certainly, no question about it. Who did Birth of a Nation?
Steven Spielberg.
Who?
Steven Spielberg.
D.W. Griffin. And he's called what?
Greatest filmmaker of all time.
What's that?
Greatest filmmaker of all time.
The father of cinema. Which is the same thing what you're saying, the greatest filmmaker of all time. He's called the father of cinema, D.W. Griffin. So when these things started happening, and I'm sure everybody's seen it or know of it. Everybody's seen Birth of a Nation,
Yep.
whether in pieces or it's been explained to you already. So then I'll move on. But it just showed black men in elective office and responsible jobs. It showed them actually chasing unprotected white women. They was really white people in blackface. They didn't use actually black people. They used white people in blackface. And it was considered a milestone. It was considered incredible cinema for that day, for 1915. Certainly things have advanced, and you will see things and look at them as flaws or as phony, as weak. But Spike Lee did a commentary on it, and he's a person that's made movies, made so many movies, and he will tell you that for the technology of that day, the movie was incredible. The way it was put together, the angles, the footage, and it was silent film, and it had the graphics under it, what was being said or what was being thought at that time. So the father of cinema, so-called, did that, and it was the rebirth of the Klan as a result of that. Because Grant had put a law in that was anti-Ku Klux Klan, so they kind of like disappeared from the scene somewhat, and that movie brought it back, and they went to Stone Mountain. Actually, they had a big cross burning and recalibrated themselves and bounced back in Georgia. And then after that, they started growing again all over the country. Where was the biggest Klan movement at? Does anybody know? The biggest by far. You said New York? Mississippi, Confederacy, Dixon. Anybody else?
Georgia.
No, not Georgia. Anybody, the largest by far.
Alabama.
Alabama. Okay, that's a good guess. No.
Alabama.
You have to remember that in Alabama, certain parts of Alabama, the White Citizens Council was even bigger than the Ku Klux Klan. You know, in Alabama. But, you know, just to tell you, it was Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana by far was the biggest. So you think of the Midwest, you think of the nice people with farms and basically in a rural area. No, no, the biggest Klan operation, do some research on it, get back to me. The biggest by far, it quadrupled any Klan organization anywhere, by far. Indiana.
Midwest state.
Yeah, it's Midwest. You know, so just, you know, and so I'm just trying to say that symbols are important. I understand both sides of the argument. Some people want to get rid of these statues, and others believe it should be there as proof of their crimes. Ray opens up and he mentions at some point during his dialogue, you know, he mentions reparations. Well, if you got rid of all the statues, then they can deny it. They can say that never happened. The same way now with some textbooks does not refer to us as slaves. It refers to us as indentured servants or forced labor, but it really doesn't specify slaves. And it certainly doesn't give you the horrors of what a slave really is. A slave is not somebody that you work for 14 hours. Because there's some people out here every day that give you a hard 14 hours, but they're paid for it. And at the same time, they have a family at home. You can't violate their household the way you can as a slave. It doesn't matter whether you, they didn't respect marriage during slavery, you know, whether two enslaved Africans jumped the broom or whatever, that was nothing to the white man. Anytime he wanted your woman, he got it. And it was legal at that time. So, like I said, I'll go with both sides of the argument. Those that want to see certain symbols removed, and others that feel that keep them there, because it's a reminder to us. Tell me what the 3/5 clause is. I want you to understand symbols. I want you to understand history and give that history some context. Anybody know what the 3/5 clause is? Without looking at your smartphones?
That's the definition of a white person, because you're 3/5 of a man,
3/5 of a what?
of a human being. You're not 5/5, which will be a whole. You're
Okay,
3/4.
anybody else? 3/5 of a human being.
Because they wanted to use the population of the slaves to have more representatives in Congress.
Yes.
The only way they would let them count was if they counted each slave man as 3/5 of a man.
Okay. Well, first of all, from the outset, if you call a person 3/5, that's saying that they're subhuman, that they're not a human being. They exist, but they're not a human being. They're subhuman if you're 3/5. So you've been regulated to cattle, a cow, a dog, a horse. You know, you're subhuman. You're less than. Now, the other part, what you said is accurate. There was an argument in the North and the South as to the North felt, since they're subhumans, because there was an agreement that we're not human beings. You know, no big deal, no argument about that. But the North felt, since all these black slaves in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, they're not human beings.
New York.
They should not be, New York, Pennsylvania, Philly, yeah. But they should not be counted because they're subhumans. So they felt that we should not be counted at all. Well, the South argument was, no, that's a person, I gotta feed this person, I gotta clothe them. Consequently, they should be counted, and they wanted to be counted because they wanted to leverage the vote. In other words, you don't want more of a population in the North to a point where the North will control the Senate and the House of Representatives as well as the U.S. Senate. Well, there became a compromise. And the compromise was the North said, you can count them, but they will only be 3/5. So if my math is right, if you counted 15 of them, it would only be 9. Is that right? Any mathematicians here? For every 15 it would be 9. Counted. And that's the way it was leveraged, and that was the compromise. The 3/5 clause. Any questions on that? We good? Okay, I think we good. We understand that. What about somebody was mentioning something, and it was something I'm going to mention tonight. What about the one drop rule? What's the one drop rule?
You got one drop of black blood, you black.
That's pretty powerful.
Anybody else? In other words, that if you're white, you're pure. If you're not white, you're nothing, you're impure. So it doesn't matter. Now the classic situation was homoplexy. Homoplexy was considered 7/8 white. 7/8. So that means you got to go back 3-4 generations. And so he was not considered white. 7/8 white. His, if you look at him phonetically, he's white. As some, like Walter White from the NAACP, he had the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the white skin, all of that, but he professed to be black because of that one drop. Where it was at in his genetics, I don't know, but with homoplexy, they said he was 7/8 white. But he's not pure. So he gets the treatment that we get because he wasn't pure. So the one drop rule is not a measure of your blackness, it's a measure of you're not white. So they're not interested if you're 3/4 or 1/4, what they used to call them, octoroons and quadroons, and all these various names they used to give to our people. And so keep that in mind, that it's based on your lack of purity. You're not pure. It doesn't matter how white you look. And certainly, we have people in our race that have passed and got good jobs, able to get a good education and all of that, but they were not pure. That's the bottom line. They were not pure. Consequently, this is why homoplexy was removed from that train car. And this is what caused that legal action that took years, but the Supreme Court ruled separate but equal. Separate but equal. So you had the right of something that's supposed to be equivalent. In other words, let's say we in Bed-Stuy. In Bed-Stuy, there's a pool for white people. And we can't go to that pool. You can petition to the courts. Now the courts got to build a pool for us. Because separate but equal. We say we don't have a pool. In summertime, all these white kids in the pool. Look at all these black children. They need a pool. White folks got to build you one because they're not going to let you in theirs. So that's the way it was used and manipulated. That's the way it was done. When we say, and I want us to understand what whiteness means in America, there's a difference in a lynching and a hanging. Can anybody explain the difference in a lynching and a hanging? It's not a trick question.
A lynching is torture.
Go ahead.
A hanging is a legal process, a lynching is a mob killing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Go ahead.
torture, cutting up the body parts, taking souvenirs. Most borrowers, or anyway it could be, cutting off their privates, putting it in their mouth.
They put it in their mouth?
Yeah, this stuff they almost have to say.
So on the way out, you said something like, boy, I'll leave that alone.
No,
Boy.
in our mouth. If you cut off my privates, they can stuff it in the mouth, take pictures. Why we don't take pictures?
Yeah, I'm being facetious, but you're absolutely right
They want to
at lynchings, that was known to happen. Somebody will come up and cut an ear off, as you mentioned, private parts. I don't know if that's penis envy or whatever it might be, but certainly that happened. And what Rod said is absolutely accurate, that a hanging is a hanging. That was one of the ways, punishment, you kill somebody, you rape, and what have you. The judgment might be hanging you. But that's considered legal. Other, and where you're at in the world, or time, place, circumstance, maybe a shooting might be the way to go. But for some, it was a hanging. Now, the difference in a hanging and a lynching is mob rule. And for the most part, we're talking about is unauthorized. A lynching is unauthorized mob rule. Now, obviously, for something to be authorized, that's through the courts. That's through a legal system. Whatever type of court that might be, you might be in the backwoods where the court is, whoever, the sheriff and a couple of people, whatever. But that would be under the guidelines or guardrails of legal, depending on where you at. Sometimes they call it country justice, whatever, but it's indicative of a legal process as opposed to mob rule. So it's just, white people would just take black folks and hang them, but the hanging would be considered a lynching. When you read in the newspaper lynching, you knew what that meant. It had nothing to do with the authorities, the courts, due process. It was outright mob rule, where the mob would do that to you. That's lynching. And we have to understand that lynching has a black face. is done by whites, but for the most part has a black face. When white people, you know, as a matter of fact, I mean, I don't even have to mention white people being lynched, because most of the times they were lynched or hung, they did something. They did something.
Dr. Mack said hanging by law lynching is extra legal.
Lynching, say that again?
Dr. Mack states that hanging by law lynching is extra legal.
Hanging by law, well, I'm not sure what he means by that, but hanging by law, but I will say that if you're hung by authorities, it's a hanging. When it's done by a mob, it's a lynching. Now with us, you know, they just did it any kind of way. Yes.
It's just a question. Was it the 13th Amendment that ended slavery, right?
The 13th Amendment
The
ended
13th
slavery.
Amendment says, involuntary servitude, I don't know if they use the word slavery, shall be abolished
Yeah,
in
they use the
all
word
of the-
slavery, yeah.
all of the environments of the United States,
Right.
except if you are convicted, you lose that protection.
Yes.
Okay. They grab an African man. What happened? Somebody can explain the differences. An African man is in the United States under that is now free of slavery or involuntary servitude. What happens when he's taken by two white men, brought into a room called a sheriff's office?
Yeah.
There's another white man there. He's the judge. And among them, they give him a trial and determine he's guilty.
Right.
At that point,
That's considered legal, but go ahead.
at that point, they convict him
Right.
of a felony. So, according to that, he loses his freedom. Once when you convicted, they said by a felony, you lose your freedom. You're back into slavery.
Right.
Those three men now are the jury and the judge. They take you out and hang you. Is it what makes it legal or illegal?
Okay, I would just respond by saying that I don't want us to get semantical, but I'm just saying the legal process is the legal process. It's either legal or it's illegal. Now, it translates to the same thing. You was hung whether you was innocent or not. But I'm just saying that was it a mob situation, or was it somebody who either went to the court system or went to the authorities in that particular locale? And so I'm just saying that when you read that in
During question and answer, they can do that.
yeah, if you read that in the Pittsburgh Courier or Chicago or Freedom's Journal or one of these black newspapers that always covered lynchings by the day, they'll say a person was lynched. After a while, you understood that when you read lynching, more often than not, that was a black person. And mob rule was mob rule. So just keep that in mind, that when you talk about lynching, for the most part, you're talking about our people, and it might have been a due process, but more often than not, if they felt you did something to a white woman or you stole somebody's chicken, they're gonna do country justice right on the spot. Take you somewhere and hang you, and just keep in mind, you can also expand the definition of lynching to what happened to Emmett Till. Every lynching is not with a rope. You can beat somebody to death. You can torture them first till they're dead. You know, there are different ways. Because, you know, with Emmett Till, they beat him down. His head was three times its normal size. And they pull the bullets through his brain. And you know, as maybe Till described, you can look from one side of his head to the other, see the light on the other side. So they blew his brains out. So, you know, there are different ways to look at
Can I ask you
a lynching.
Would George Foreman be a form of lynching?
Yeah, you can expand it to that. You know, with context, you can expand it to that because in other words, it's not just with a rope. That's the main point. That, you know, what's his name? Thomas on the Supreme Court. He had the temerity to describe what he went through before he was voted in as a Supreme Court justice. He called that a political lynching.
High-tech lynching.
Yeah, he used the term high-tech.
From the black guy on the Supreme Court?
He claimed that what the allegations against him, it was a high-tech lynching. That's what he called it. Because so you can use lynching in various ways, and he chose to use it like that. You know, so whether what was being said about him was true or not, that's in other words, it's not always a rope. That's not limited to just a rope, because what Emmett Till experienced was a lynching.
It's George Foreman as well.
Yeah, a type of lynching. And Ida B. Wells, she, in other words, she understood the meaning of whiteness in America, which is why she used, what is the term called? A pseudonym, a pen name, a ghostwriter,
That means the same
whatever you
thing.
want to call it. You know, she used that in her writing. She was a teacher during the day, and she wrote articles at night. So she used a pseudonym to, I think her pen name was Iola, yeah, that was her name. Iola, that's the name she used in her writings. So,
Amazing thing too, they just outlawed lynching last year.
yeah, they outlawed it a couple of years ago.
Wasn't it last year?
Last year or the year before. Now you have to remember, it's interesting.
Under this president, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because what was the vote? How was the vote conducted? That's very important, because they've been trying to get an anti-lynching law for decades. It goes way back to Ida B. Wells. It goes way back to the NAACP. If one thing that I will say about the NAACP, its concern was lynching in the early days. You know, as a matter of fact, it started with the lynching of blacks in Springfield, Illinois. So by the time they got together and formed it, and they went up to Niagara and formed it with well-known blacks, their thing was lynching. Now, how was that lynching bill done in Congress? Anybody know? Caught that part? Is very important. It was anonymous. It was anonymous. No, it was secret. Have you ever heard of a bill being passed where you can't identify the actual members and how they voted. This is how it was done. America has been so pro-lynching all these years. So you're talking about this is, since this has been a move since the late 1800s, early 1900s. Why did it just pass a year or so ago? Year two, because they finally made an agreement that this won't get passed. In other words, and I'm not only talking about Southerners. I'm not only talking about Southerners. So I'm not talking about former Confederate states. They got people in the Midwest that would not sign any legislation that supported an anti-lynching bill.
Or they wanted to continue.
I won't say that they wanted to continue. They didn't want their name on a document saying that they was against it.
2022.
Or others, okay, so I was right, 2 years ago, right? 2022. Yeah, so 2 years ago. So that bill was done basically in secret. So you just know it was passed, but you don't know who voted on what. Who was on one side, who was on the other side. That's what it took to get it passed. All these years. Now going back to when Ida B. Wells, all those years, her thing was lynching. NAACP, the early years, lynching. So many other blacks, William Monroe Trotter and others, lynching. So, yeah.
James Byrd.
It's well, somebody mentioned James Byrd. That was also a lynching.
Dismemberment of his body.
Of his body parts. That's a lynching. Tell me something, another one that we have to understand, so we'll know where we at politically. What's a squatter?
Squatter.
A squatter. When you hear the term squatter, whether it's in the past or present day, what's a squatter?
Somebody who is
Somebody who what? What's a squatter?
Somebody on land space that's not theirs who refuse to move and give them 30 days more to come there. If it's all possible. People who set up house on somebody else's property and refuse to move. And they want to assume ownership if they can.
Okay.
Because they're there illegally from Jump Street.
Somebody that settled on a piece of land that's not theirs. Yes? You got to speak up. So
We have settlers that have settled on land that don't belong to us. That's
No,
what we
what's a
remember.
squatter?
A squatter can also be someone who they did deed theft to and they refuse to leave.
Okay. Everybody's somewhat right. It's
Squatter also is someone who goes and lives someplace and claims it as their home.
That's right.
And then gets a deed for it.
That's right.
And then they add it.
well, it's to settle on a piece of land.
That's right.
A squatter is a person that settles on a piece of land without a title.
That's right.
You don't have a title, but you're on the land, and so whether you're paying rent or you're not paying rent, you're a squatter.
No mortgage.
Now, which means that collectively, our people more often than not are squatters. Because you don't own the land that you live on. And there was a time where most of us owned the land that we lived on. That's not the case today. That's not the case in urban America. And so it goes beyond just living on the land without a title. Because obviously there are those who live on land without a title with the hopes of acquiring it. Now suppose you live in some place and you have no goal at any point to own it. then you're a squatter. At least if you want to own it, you might be able to make provisions at some point where you can own it. But if you don't own it, and you have no intentions on owning it, in a real sense, you're a squatter. Even if you're paying rent, you're a squatter. So keep that in mind, that our people, we're doing a lot of squatting, for the most part.
Even if you're paying rent, it's being a tenant here.
Because you don't own. You living on land that you don't own, you don't have a title on that land.
So lack of ownership is a squatter?
No, not lack of ownership. Settling on land that you don't own. And you're not making the proper protocols to own it. You're a squatter. Now, some people, the average black person in Bed-Stuy can go into a house that's abandoned. They're going to get thrown out more often than not by the police. A white person will move into a brownstone that's abandoned, put in a little cord or wire, put the lights on, and they stay there for a certain amount of time, and they will claim that it's theirs and they're improving the location. Consequently, they can start the process of owning it. Get the proper bank loan or what have you, and then they'll acquire it. So keep that in mind. What's sumptuary laws? I'm just giving you things that we should know. Because, as I said, symbols, and there are certain things, concepts that we need to know. What's sumptuary laws?
Can you spell that?
Spell it phonetically.
Yeah.
I'm just mentioning.
I love you too.
Sunptuary. Laws. LAWS. Sumptuary laws. Now I'm telling you things that we should know. If you lived in the right location, you would know the sumptuary law. Now UAN people should know that. People who be in UAN should know that. What sumptuary laws are.
She said,
Yeah, I'm looking at you.
She said Vanessa.
Okay, a sumptuary law is a law that restricts, let's say, your attire. You can't wear certain attire. You can't drive certain vehicles traditionally in some places. In other words, if you were in rural Alabama, Mississippi, you can't walk around with no suit on, a suit and a tie, and a nice pair of leather shoes, and a Stetson hat. No such thing. You had on jeans, coveralls, you know, that's how you had to dress. You can't walk around with a silk shirt on and some diamonds and gold. You can't walk around like that. You're going to look too attractive to white men. You're going to look like you're out of that class and you're in another class.
That you made out of money, right?
Yeah, you can't now, in the traditional South, doctors, teachers, funeral parlor,
Lawyers.
yeah, well, there wasn't many lawyers, but yeah, lawyers. There wasn't many lawyers down there that was black.
Pastors.
And pastors.
But what year was this sumptuary law?
Well, it existed
Still today.
until, let's say, in the civil rights movement, it started to change. But for those first 60, 70 years out of slavery, you could not dress out of your class. You could not indicate an avarice lifestyle.
That is so wasteful. Who got time for this?
You know, now you could do that in New York, but you could not do that in the Carolinas, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. You couldn't dress like that.
Moving hurricane park.
Somebody's gonna step to you.
Moving hurricane park, remember? Moving hurricane park,
The boxer, yeah.
who's driving a fancy car, that's the only reason it's not.
Well, they still stop people for driving fancy cars, late model, foreign cars and nice cars, what have you. But sumptuary laws indicate it was things that were imposed on you as a black. You know how the classic look down south was the coveralls? You know, the jeans, coveralls. Things like that, and jeans, work clothes, construction kind of attire. That's the way you had to dress, except on Sundays. Don't get me wrong now, on Sundays, you were allowed to, dress to the nines. So guys would wear something nice Saturday nights down south, and certainly on Sunday for church. But those were sumptuary laws that you might get a visit from somebody if you were violating them. And it was understood. See, I know that, it doesn't mean anything here and now at this time, sumptuary laws, but that was a big thing at one time. It was big to come up north from down there and to buy you a Cadillac. You couldn't tell a black man nothing if he got a Cadillac. He was the man.
You ain't tell him nothing there?
So that was a big thing. So sumptuary laws. States' rights. What does a white person mean when you hear in these Sunday morning discussions, roundtable discussions that you get, where you see lawyers, elected officials, businessmen, when they say states' rights, what are they talking about?
Let the state handle it?
A little more than that, states' rights.
It's the sovereign legality of the states overriding the federal government.
Absolutely. Say that again.
Say it loud. Say it loud.
The sovereign legality of the states overriding the federal laws.
Yes, that is something that was always argued, because the central government has always been looked at as minding somebody else's business, being able to interfere with what Georgia deems as the way of life. This is the culture in Georgia. This is the culture in South Carolina. So they don't want somebody from Washington, D.C. telling them how to handle their black problem, their Negro problem. They want to handle their own business. So states' rights has always been the code words for white supremacy. Has always been. Because they don't want anybody telling them how to handle their situation in Georgia, in North Carolina.
It was the same in the north too, correct?
Yeah, but in the north, I'd say that it was not as pronounced. But in the South, they wasn't going to allow the federal government. The majority of problems in the South, the feds had to enforce it. In other words, if you were to go to school, in other words, the 82nd Airborne had to go to Arkansas, right? And when, in what, 1957? They had to go to Arkansas, and Clinton was around. Clinton was in that high school where it happened at, where to get black students into the school, they had to have the 82nd Airborne come and escort them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how serious it got. Because that happened in Arkansas, as you well know. What happened in Alabama? Who stood in front of the University of Alabama? Who? Who was the governor?
Not the one in the wheelchair.
Wallace.
Yeah.
He eventually ended up in the wheelchair, but at the time, he could walk. At the time, he could walk, and he said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. So he was told, now he had conversations with the chief of staff, you know, Kennedy's chief of staff, the attorney general specifically, and Kennedy told him, look, man, you gotta let them students in. And his position was like, over my dead body. They're not coming in here. So that's states' rights. That's, in other words, you're not gonna tell Alabama how to conduct its business. That's states' rights. And that's an argument that goes on to this day.
Or Texas.
That's to this day. They will not be allowed certain things to be imposed on them by the federal government. So when I say DC, I'm talking about the federal government. There are federal mandates that have to be enforced, and they were enforced to get us into schools, whether it was law schools, whether it was medical schools, or whether it was a high school, like I said, in Arkansas, or the University of Alabama. They don't allow, you know, the federal government to dictate to them, and they'll fight. They will fight, and George Wallace backed down because Robert Kennedy told them straight up, if you block that doorway, I'm gonna have the troops lock you up, and you're gonna face federal charges. Now, he said, you can look good in front of your people now and bark all you want, but when we show, we're gonna lock you up. So he put on an act all the way up until the moment he was gonna get locked up. He wanted to show Alabama, I'm behind you. That's what George Wallace did. And this is long before the, as you said, the wheelchair after he was shot.
And they got a problem with Kennedy today.
You know, so, you know, but that was his daddy. That was his daddy. It was Robert Kennedy Sr. who told him straight up, man, that we're gonna lock you up. You know, that if you don't move out the way and insist on blocking the doorway, we're gonna lock you up. They're gonna put cuffs on you and get you out of here. So that's states' rights. Another one, original intent, and I'm just, you know, running things by you so you understand, you know, just what whiteness means. When a person argues and talks about original intent, what are they talking about? What's original intent? Anybody? When you hear somebody says something regarding original intent, most of the times when we hear these arguments, these are strictly lawyers. These are lawyers arguing original intent. Original intent has to do with the framers.
The Constitution.
The founding fathers. In other words, what they do is think of what would George Washington say? What would Madison say? What would Monroe say? What would Jefferson say? What would Adams say? You get the picture?
Coming from Philly.
In other words, the framers understood how this operation was to be run. Now you come in with some civil rights stuff, some crap. That's not what the framers believed. I mean, if framers saw some of y'all highfalutin Negroes walking in airports now, slinging plastic, hey, book me on this flight, and you going to these nice stores on Fifth Avenue, buying nice clothes,
That's a problem with it.
or you going to a restaurant, give me that table right there.
4 or 5 star.
And you know, when you go into hotels, you go into
With
hotels,
who?
Me and my wife.
going to hotels that cost you $2,000 a night because you're getting the presidential suite in a hotel, living large and in charge.
With my wife.
What would, with your white woman, yeah. What would the framers think? If they saw you, they figured you in this hotel, you must be cleaning room. He's in the presidential suite. I mean, what would they do if they saw Obama in the White House with a black wife? They say, man, this world is going, this is Planet of the Apes.
What the hell is going on here?
You know, they wouldn't know what to do with it themselves if they saw that. So, the framers, believe it or not, lawyers argue to this day on original intent. And these are no lightweight arguments. These are serious arguments as to, can this person go to school? Do they have a right to a job? Can they even vote? You can make those arguments. Does this person have the right to engage in commerce? Can you buy a house? Can you live wherever you want to live? These are real arguments that people have. And of course, obviously, over these decades, people have lost their lives trying to get into a house. Y'all remember the Sweet case?
Yeah, in Detroit?
Yes. Y'all remember that Sweet case?
Sweet cake.
The Sweet case. Ossian, his name, Dr. Ossian Sweet. He was a physician. He bought a house in a well-to-do area
White area.
of Detroit,
White area.
a white area. I ain't talking about black bottom Detroit. I'm talking about a white area.
Creme de la
A creme de la creme, or the regular calls it the creme de la creme, or he calls it the coupe de ville.
Coupe de ville, baby.
So he bought a house in the coupe de ville. Dr. Sweet, Dr. Ossian Sweet. Well, they started vandalizing his house. Before he moved in and whenever he was be going. They break in his windows and they told him he couldn't move in. So he defied them and moved in. And when he moved in, he did something that most black men don't do. No, he had a church meeting in his house. See, church is a little different now. Church used to be a place where you would go when you needed a winter coat, and the winter was there. Church was a place where if the Klan was threatening you,
That's right.
you go to the brotherhood and say, we're gonna meet, we're gonna have a little prayer in our house. And oh, and by the way, bring your 45.
That's fine.
Bring your 45. Bring that shotgun. We're gonna hang around in the house and we're gonna pray.
Queen
Church used to be like that. Church not like that anymore. You ask the brotherhood in the church to help you out because the Klan is coming by your house. You know what they're gonna say? I'll pray for you, brother. That's what they're gonna say. I'll pray for you. My prayers are with you. So the Brotherhood was at his house with a couple of family members. When these terrorists came to his house and shot out, his windows, they shot back. Well, one of those devils fell. Do you know they turned around? Now what they did was, they went past the police line because since he was a doctor, the police had a line outside his house that you couldn't cross. They had a police line out there. I give them that. I give the Detroit Police Department that. They did have a line. But why they let the people cross the line? They crossed the line and started shooting. Dr. Ossian Sweety's a doctor, but guess what? He shot back. He said, man, you shooting me, I'm gonna shoot at you. Well, one of them fell. One of them fell. This was before Malcolm. So he this is going back to like a Martin Delaney and those types. Henry Highland Garnett.
1925 they did it.
So this was a long time ago. Do you know that they charged Ossian Sweet and his family of shooting and killing somebody outside his house, shooting at him? Well, it was a long trial, and they had some top lawyers, and they had Clarence Darrell and others who came and defended them, and they won. It took a while, but it stressed out the people involved, because if they don't get you in the wash, they get you in the rinse. And, when they keep pressure on you for a long time, unfortunately, you start developing illnesses. That's why they call stress the silent killer. Because it does things to you that you might not even recognize. But suffice it to say that long ago, it was 100 years ago, fought the case and he won. Black folks don't normally win those cases out. Yes, it helped a little bit being a doctor. It helped. Because they couldn't call you some illiterate Negro. He's a doctor, had a good practice. So, in any event.
But did that happen to the Bronx James recently, in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, but that was vandalism. We talking about shooting and threatening your life. LeBron's life wasn't threatened. It's just that he moved in an area so prestigious that they wrote whatever tropes or whatever they wrote. I think it was the N-word. I'm almost pretty certain.
Yes.
I'm almost pretty certain that it was the N-word they used in LeBron's case. But I'm not sure, but I don't think his life was ever in danger. In Dr. Sweet's case, his life was in danger. His life was on the line. And you can imagine 100 years ago, when white folks say they're going to get you, they're going to get you. They're going to rile people up and get them to a point. It wasn't like he was looking for some white woman's, or anything like that. He wasn't, he had his own family. But, yes, sir. Dr. Lewis in the house.
We're going to save it for the question and answer. This is what I would like the group of us to consider. The lawyers, when they ask what goes back to the original intent of your founding fathers, those lawyers I would ask, just as a question, were at the end. Who were the founding fathers? They were clear. And in that Constitution, so there's no confusion.
Right.
At the end, that question about what the original founding fathers, they were clear. It's right in that Constitution. There's no confusion.
Right.
I end it.
Okay.
We'll entertain that hopefully.
Okay. Yes, sir.
But if,
And
because
if I forget,
they seem
please,
to have amnesia about
if I forget,
accountable
bring that back to
fathers
my remembrance. Bring that back.
Huh?
About original intent. Bring that back. Okay. Now,
That was based on white man.
He said for the question and answer, so we don't
okay,
divert it.
we'll get right back to that. That's the question is on original intent. I'll say that whether it's things along those lines of original intent, in terms of whether you're Democrat or Republican, white supremacy reigns supreme. There's white supremacy in both parties, and they're at the top of the ticket in both parties. Who would you consider to be the modern day philosophical architect of the Democratic Party?
Today?
On the Democratic Party?
Of the Democratic Party.
You talking about today?
No, I'm just saying the current Democratic Party as it now exists. Who would you look towards and say, this is the person who more often than not frames the discussion about what the platform is going to be?
Johnson?
I'd say it precedes Johnson, but I know why you said Johnson. I know why you said Johnson, because he kind of followed that stuff to the letter. I'd say FDR, the modern day Democrats. FDR, I'll get into before we start the Q&A, I'll get into the original Democratic Party, just the difference. But I would say that FDR is sort of the architect for the modern day Democratic Party. What about for the Republican Party?
Reagan.
Calvin Coolidge.
Y'all are saying some pretty good names. Say the names again.
Calvin Coolidge.
Coolidge
The Business of America.
is business, yeah. That was his famous saying. Okay, and who else did y'all say?
Reagan, you said modern day, so I'm thinking a little closer to where we are.
Well, it all depends on when you say the Republican Party, who the theoretical framework would be from who?
Lincoln.
No, the Republican Party is nothing like what Lincoln. Lincoln would recognize this.
Lincoln was Republican, so was Douglas. We were all Republicans,
I'm gonna deal with that in Q&A. Please bring that back to my remembrance. I'm gonna do that. Just to move things fast, I'm gonna say is Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond.
The client.
Those are the two guys that the framework of the modern day Republican Party would be Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond, both from neighboring states, North Carolina and South Carolina. Now, you have to remember, all the Republicans, to answer some of your question, I'm gonna get ahead of it and answer it. All of the Republican Party, the leaders, whether it's, like I said, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, others, and the Eastmans and all of them, at one time they were Democrats. They were Democrats. What changed them? In 1948, who ran? right, was the top Democrat because FDR died. So Truman succeeded him because he was his VP. Truman ran, and in 1948, he presented the Democratic platform for that year, 48. And I'm gonna give you the 4 things that he said, and then I'll tell you what happened after that to answer a point about Democrats and Republicans. He introduced 4 plaques on the platform, which were, number 1, anti-lynching. That's number 1, anti-lynching. Number 2, military desegregation. Number 3, equal employment opportunity, EEO. Number 4, elimination of poll taxes. Now that's not earth-shattering, but that's a departure. The Democrats were always the party of slavery. It's always been the party of white supremacy. It's always been the party of states' rights. That's why I'm saying it was a shift with FDR, where he had to do things for poor people, because white folks was in soup lines and starving. He had to do something to put America back to work, so he started the WPA program. And in that way, he helped white people feed their families, similar to the way Obama was trying to get an infrastructure bill, and which was done by Biden. It wasn't to help black people, it was to help white people. So, these 4 things, anti-lynching, as the sister mentioned, it was presented in 1948. When was it done? 2022. Okay? That's over 70 years later.
Right.
Anti-lynching. Military desegregation. Truman did that in 1948, as soon as he got, back in office. He desegregated the military. It was segregated. In other words, black troops did not serve with white troops. Now, black troops had white officers, but they didn't have white soldiers working with them. They had white bosses.
And they paid 75 cents for a hamburger. Blacks had to pay 75 cents for a hamburger, whites paid 5 cents.
So that segregation that was occurring in the military was very important. There would be no Colin Powell and others, or the current Secretary of Defense now, if it wasn't for that. They actually separated the military all these years, going back a few hundred years. It was always separate. Even in the Revolutionary War, separate. Civil War, separate. Spanish-American War. Even Teddy Roosevelt with the Rough Riders, separate. So this was on the platform of the Democrats. The desegregation of the military. The third thing, EEO. Now, most people have an EEO office on their job. You might call it EEO, you might call it human resources, or you might call it a personnel office. But you have an office where you can air your grievances, and they can listen to you. It's just not somebody say like, you're fired. No, there's a process. So that's EEO. And that's not only to keep your job, that's to get the job. You have an equal opportunity to get the job. Which other words, civil service. That came out of the Democratic Party. And the last thing, elimination of poll taxes. Anybody know what a poll tax is? Can somebody tell me what a poll tax is? Yes, speak up.
They were charging Africans a tax to pay, to vote.
Well, not so much that you had to pay. There were literally exams. There were different ways. You know, a guy.
A test to vote.
A guy could ask you to
Yes, the number of jelly beans.
ask you either the jelly bean counter, how many jelly beans there, how many bowls are in a bar of soap, all kind of crazy things.
Yeah.
Ask you that you can't answer it, or tell you to say some a part of the Constitution, say it backwards, or you know, or ask you quickly say the alphabet backwards. You can't do it. You can't vote. So these are the kind of things. So whether it's in the form of money, literacy, what have you, these things had to be eliminated. Now, do you know what the Democratic Party did when that happened? They marched out of the convention. Can you imagine that? The Democratic leadership in the South all walked out. You got that? So Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and all of them, they all walked out. When they all walked out, what did they become?
Southern Democrat.
No, Dixiecrats. They became Dixiecrats because in 1948, they rejected that platform and immediately left and formed their own party, Dixiecrats. Now, after forming their own party, I see this getting late, I know, okay, after forming their own party of Dixiecrats, they later became Republicans. Because they would never go back to the Democratic Party. So if you got those four things, anti-lynching, military desegregation, EEO, and the poll tax, elimination of poll taxes, that was enough to make people who were lifelong Democrats leave the party and go to the, the Dixiecrats, from the Dixiecrats to being infused into the present day Republican Party. What's, real quickly before we start the Q&A, what's the Missouri Compromise? What was that? Anybody know?
That was enslavement and.
Go ahead. It had something to do with slavery, yeah.
I think it was Kansas and those areas were one for enslavement.
That's different.
They offered
That's-
slaves freedom and.
No. Yes.
How many states are going to be slave, how many states are going to be free? That
Well,
was-
kind of, sort of. In 1820, Missouri was brought into the Union as a slave state, and Maine was brought into the Union as a non-slave, not free. I don't want to get us used to saying that term free, as if every black person in Maine is free. A non-slave state. In other words, you could have slavery in a non-slave state. So you're not free. So there's a distinction here. The Missouri Compromise, they wanted to balance. They didn't want to be overvoted. They didn't want to be overpowered in any way. So to bring another state into the Union, I mean, physically it was there, but it wasn't in the Union. So to bring in Missouri, the Northerners brought in Maine.
M-A-I-N-E, Maine.
M-A-I-N-E, that's correct.
Okay.
Maine. So now that's 1820. Now, I think what you were talking about is 1854. What happened there? Now, this is now in 1820, that's 41 years before the Civil War. This happened 7 years before the Civil War. The Kansas-Nebraska Act. It brought in 2 states, slave states, Kansas and Nebraska. Now, when that happened, there was a lot of concern, there was violence. As you know, Bleeding Kansas came out of that because white folks started fighting. Because there's always been white folks that, it's not that they love black people, but they didn't like slavery. You know, they didn't like it. So it was no love for us, but it was the fact that don't bring that stuff in. You know, so when that happened, there was a lot of fighting, infighting. That's why they called that era in that time Bloody Kansas. And everybody knew, whether they were Whigs at the time or the Republicans at that time, you know, the party that Lincoln was a part of, they knew that a civil war was inevitable because you had got to a point where people were fighting already and war wasn't even declared yet. But people were fighting over this, and it was reaching a critical mass. And they was already hearing dialogue from Lincoln that was anti-slavery anyway. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act kind of sealed the doom of America to be two Americas. And it took Lincoln to bring it back together. That's what it took. So I'm ready to, real quick, actually just 2 more questions, 2 or 3 quick questions, if you know. The Samuel Tilden, Rutherford B. Hayes compromise, what was that? The Samuel Tilden / Rutherford B. Hayes compromise, what was that?
Take the truth out of the South.
Say that again?
Take the truth out of the South and give it over to the Hayes so it can be heard.
That's part of it. That's a significant part of it. What she's saying, in other words, was they reached what's called a constitutional crisis. What is a constitutional crisis? That was the first real one, a constitutional crisis where they could not declare a winner between Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes. They could not declare a winner. So it went to a closed-door meeting. At a closed-door meeting of 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats. Now, if you have 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats, is it going to be resolved?
Yeah, odd number to bring the tie.
You need an odd person. And who was that odd person? The Chief Justice. The Chief Justice of the United States. William Bradley. William Bradley had to break the tie because 7 and 7. So he brokered a deal, and the deal was exactly what you were talking about. The South did not care who was president. The South was interested in home rule. I'm going to say it again. The South was interested in home rule. You can't have home rule with federal troops in your backyard. So they cut a deal saying, look, we will let Rutherford B. Hayes be president. It's not a problem. We'll give it to him. But we need a stern agreement that you will pull up federal troops out of the South, out of the entire former Confederacy. If you do that, you can have your president. The North said, okay. So Rutherford B. Hayes became president, and he pulled all the troops out of the South. And in doing that was the bloodiest period black folks ever experienced in America. I'm gonna say it again. That's the bloodiest period black folks experienced in America. They had to deal with white people who had to so-called put us in our place, because by 76, the radical reconstruction was going on, and black people had offices, a couple of U.S. senators, 5 or 6 Congress people, a lot of state senators and what have you, and that reign of terror began right after all the federal troops were pulled out. By then, you had blacks who were in law enforcement, you had blacks who worked in hospitals and civil service jobs. That was literally all removed in one fell swoop. One fell swoop. All removed. Once the federal troops were taken out, that reign of terror went through the entire South. And they had home rule all the way up until 1954 was the first time a civil rights bill was passed. Up until that time, home rule. And that was Brown v. Board of Education. Before that, no civil rights legislation passed. You had to stay in your place or else. And or else was that shotgun. So that went on for decades. And I didn't even get into convict lease, and I'll leave that alone. And I'll either stop there or I'll stop there. I don't have to get into what happened in Wilmington, because it was similar. That things like that happen so many times. So I'll stop there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Mike a great big hand. Okay, this is going to be question and answer. The first question is going to be from the Zoom audience. Zoom audience, do you have a question? All right, let me see. It looks like Keisha. Keisha, you got a question?
Let's go with Dr. Lewis.
All right, Dr. Lewis.
No, it's just a matter for the individuals here to consider it and discuss it.
Yes.
The first and second constitutional convention this country had, the two questions they dealt with was the relationship between states' rights and the central government.
Yes.
And the second issue they dealt with, and it's only no other issue, was the issue of slavery. Because slavery was the economic foundation of that entire structure. Number one. For your consideration, when you look at, if you believe what those two constitutional conventions, when they occurred, who attended? The Constitutional Convention, if I'm not correct, was written, the Constitution was written from those two constitutional conventions.
Yeah.
Now here's about intent. The lawyers may not be honest. Every one of the individuals who had anything to do with writing the Constitution, because they were representative from the colonies, some came each time, and it wasn't always the same. But everyone had this in common. They were white, they were male, basically Anglo-Saxon, everyone a slaveholder. Now you ask yourself the question, examine the Constitution, the question I'm asking, I contend the Constitution is 100% a slave document. Those 13 colony representatives, the Constitution is a compilation of the slave code of each of those 13 colonies, including they call it the fugitive slave. They dealt with that. So they know what the intent was.
Okay, I would say to that you're partially right. I mean, Sam Adams, there was a few that were not slave owners. But for the most part, Dr. Lewis is correct that most of them were slave owners. I would say that, agree with him, that the Constitution is a slave document. You have to remember, the Constitution is a coercive instrument. What do I mean when I say coercive? Force and power. It will force you to do what you don't want to do because that's why it was written. To impose their will on others. So he's right that it is a slave document and that for the most part, most of the people in that room were slave owners. They were all rich, they were all white, they were all male. That's true. The reason why they weren't all slave owners is because, like I said, Sam Adams and a few others, it just wasn't their cup of tea. That doesn't mean they love black folks. It just wasn't their cup of tea. So he's right that it's a slave document. And he's right that that the same way they felt then, many feel now. And that's, you know, we still dealing with white supremacy. And if you know anything about Amos Wilson, that was his whole thing. Fighting white supremacy at its core and developing a mindset among us to be able to fight white supremacy. What was your question? You remember? You had a question earlier that you said that needed to be addressed through Q&A. Okay, I'll come back to you. Zoom?
Zoom audience, anybody? Zoom? Mikhail is from Detroit. He says Garland Street is on the east side of Detroit, where Sweet tried to buy the house.
So what area is that called?
Garland Street is on the east side of Detroit.
Garland Street is on the east side. She lives right off of Mac, between Mac and Canville.
Is it still a nice area or what? Is it exclusive?
He's asking Mikhail, is it an exclusive area in Detroit?
Well, what they did in the 90s, they did these refurbished homes on all the vacant lots. And a lot of those homes are still standing, but a lot of them, people broke in them and stripped them down and tore them up.
Okay.
They've been building up the east side. Because I got my parents' house on the east side, not far from.
Okay, well, when this happened to
Indian Village. So Indian Village got those like mansions or mini mansions.
okay.
Not far from there, but all on the east side of those houses, the property value, everything is going up. And you know, a lot of them are moving in those neighborhoods.
Okay, because 100 years ago, when when this happened to Dr. Sweet in the 1920s, that was an exclusive area, and he was the first black. He was the first black over there, and that's why they tried to run him out.
Jews stayed over there.
Okay.
They passing away.
Okay, anybody else from the Zoom? Thank you, Mikhail. Anybody else from the Zoom have a question? Going once?
Spell the name of the street. Mikhail.
Garland. Mikhail, Zoom, anybody else?
He said Garland Street.
Garden?
Garland.
Oh, thank you.
Look up Garland Street in Detroit, Michigan. Okay, any questions from the floor? Hold it, we got something here, hold up. Okay, anybody, Keisha, you got it? This is from, all right. He'll tell you that, want to answer that?
What is it? I can't understand.
When will community cop come back on?
Very soon.
That was my question too.
We're gonna start real soon. We're gonna start real soon.
All right.
Okay, he
I
says,
asked you that before, my brother, earlier this year. I asked you.
Yeah, and there were some things that we had to do, that we had to work on. But I'm glad you asked me because that only shows me everywhere I go and they ask, that means the interest is still there. So that's a good thing. I'm glad you asked.
Yep.
any other questions from the Zoom? If not, Lady V?
Even,
Gotta speak up, sir.
even today, the same things are going on. That's why they tried to shut down schools that were progressive. When you try to educate your own children, that comes back to these same laws. You know, in the 90s, I say every community had a black school, you know.
What's the question? Or is it just a statement? Yeah, well, obviously, white people know that one of the keys in advancing is through education. I'm not saying it's the only way because if we did business one to another, all of us don't have to be college grads. We don't have to have advanced degrees. If we took care of our business right, we'd be okay. But I would just say that they're going to always stifle or find ways to create roadblocks with you going to school because they don't want your children to compete with their children. So it's not only for them, they're looking into the future and realize that if you don't have an education and you don't aspire towards having an education, they got so many other pitfalls in front of you, drugs, crime, all kind of opportunities that if you don't take positive steps, they wait to, you know, that prison pipeline. So education is always important.
Exactly. And if your children are educated in the Garvey way or on the facts, they are not going to make money off of them, as with slavery and being in jail. They get more than $35,000 per person in a prison.
Yeah. So you know, obviously there are principles that Garvey laid down that we would find very useful to this very day. There's no question about it. That Garvey had an excellent program, and if that's implemented today, which you see UNIA is doing, it's on the come up. It's no question. Rod, you got a question?
So I hope to see you all.
Okay, so it looks like, okay, Zoom. Not that I can hear you, because Ray.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now, yeah.
Okay, good. I got my mic working again. Question for you. It's twofold. One, could you expound upon some of the military education that you received from James Bryson? And also, how do you see this nation going with the current choices that the people have in Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Okay, let me answer the first part of your question first. In terms of James Bryson, there's very few that was the equal of James Bryson in military tactics and military strategy, and also military history. I was asked by some brothers in Ferguson during that whole Ferguson rebellion on how to protect yourself from tear gas and some other things that I won't mention that the police were doing in Ferguson. I thought long and hard, and I have a resource on that. It was James Bryson. So I asked James Bryson what to do to help these brothers in Ferguson. He gave me the information, and I gave it to them. That's the kind of brother that James Bryson was. That if you asked him, he will tell you if you're in a quandary with respect on how to get out of certain situations.
As well as
You know, look, James Bryson had a history in life and death situations. And he had some clear, concise answers on what they needed to do in Ferguson. You know, and I gave that information to them. Now, the other part of your question was Kamala Harris and what?
As it relates to our people, right now you have this huge debate.
They have to what?
Voting is concerned. But what is your position as it relates to the choices that they have?
Unfortunately, we don't have a choice. In a real sense, we don't have a dog in this fight. You got Trump, Vance, and Harris and Walz. What choice do we have in this? I would say that I'm not going to tell people not to vote. Vote in your own self-interest all the time. Anytime you vote, vote in your own self-interest. We have to develop, and for some of us, repeat a black independent party. That's going to be our only salvation, is develop our own, or even if we were to vote in one of the two duopolies, I would say invest in our own. Put our own in that position. Right now, most of the people we see that run for office have been selected. They have passed, they have been selected by white people to represent the black community. A classic case would be Cory Booker. He was put there to fool our community, to get the black vote, and to just do their bidding. So we have a lot of people like that as U.S. senators, governors, mayors. It's, it's not hardly any black governors, but, whatever positions they're in, we don't really have a dog in most of these fights. But if we developed on a local level, we could, in some states, we could put in a governor. We can put in U.S. senators in a few states. So I would just say that none of them are in a position to really get my vote. I don't see the good in any of them. And I certainly I'm not going to be fooled by Kamala Harris, a person who lived the life of an Asian, an Indian, and now suddenly calling herself black when it suits her. So I would just say that my person, if I could pick a president and I picked them, they'd be president, it would be Cynthia McKinney, hands down. Because she showed under tumultuous conditions that she voted in black interests and did not kowtow to the state of Israel, as every black in elected office literally does, except Gus Savage, Cynthia McKinney, Alcee Hastings, most others kiss the ground that Jews walk on. And we don't need that. We need people whose primary bosom interest is us, first and foremost. And you don't see that in elected officials now. They went after Alcee Hastings, they went after Gus Savage, and they went after Cynthia McKinney.
And point of information being that he said about Cynthia, I want to thank Sister Filet and her program that comes on Saturday at 10:30 this past week. They are using eminent domain in Georgia because they want to build a railroad through over 18 homes in Georgia. And Sister Empress and Blog Talk Radio had the lady on, and don't seem like nothing's going to be done about it.
Well, eminent domain is nothing new. That's been used by the federal government, by the state government for the past 100 years or even longer. This is the way they did it in city after city. We had over 100 prosperous cities of blacks, independent economies. They always used eminent domain, whether that's in the form of a highway, whether that's in the form of a shopping mall. They find ways to divide and break up prosperous black communities. So they've always done that. That's nothing new. Eminent domain, it's always been done. They've done that in the most prestigious black areas all over the country since the turn of, not this century, the last century. All through the 1900s, they've used eminent domain. So that in itself is nothing new.
I mean, that's what the park, Senator
Yeah. No doubt about it, and that's going to continue to happen if we allow it. You know, when the black soldiers got out of World War II, they went to Harlem when they got out. But the white soldiers utilized the GI Bill and moved to Levittown in Long Island. And they had a modern appliances of housing. They had houses, they brought home the same amount of money, and all the white soldiers out of World War II ended up in Long Island and Levittown in a modern house, paying the same price that black soldiers who moved to Harlem in rat and roach infested houses were living in apartment buildings. They got private houses with modern kitchens and what have you in Levittown.
Just to tail in on that, you can purchase a book we all know. It's called How the U.S. Government Segregated America. Your federal, just remember, this government, like most, has two policies, a domestic policy and a foreign policy. This country, since the founding fathers up to this day, is controlled by white Anglo-Saxon men who run the country, an oligarchy. We said that we mentioned that with Smedley Butler and the fact how Congress is constructed.
That's right.
The United States government, your government, you get the book, How America Segregated the Country. The people who run the country, they made the segregation that brother alluded to.
So
Two other things. Your government participated in the Berlin and Brussels Conference. They took Liberia and part of Congo State as their colony. So just remember, this government, even though when you look at the Berlin and Brussels Conference, their name doesn't come up, they were there.
And I think it was Robert Moses. I think that's his name, the person who went all over the country using eminent domain.
And one of the statistics to quote, to get a little bit better idea of the people who are running this government, there is, and I'll give you the reference, there is a report out recently that the 5 presidents of the United States, I think they started with, wait, the one with the saxophone.
Well, Clinton?
Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. Your country, their document, your government documents your country under these 5 presidents went to war against non-white countries and they killed 5 million people directly, and the result of that carnage to the Africans and Asians and non-white people, everyone killed directly, 4 die as a result. So your 5 presidents, your government internationally killed 20 million people. So when you reflect on what African people have suffered here, it's parallel to what is done on the other thing. And one last thing, we have to revisit, as the brother is telling us, our history. Because Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. And what did it say? Read it. Slavery shall be ended only in those states of rebellion.
Right.
At the time of the Civil War, there were 34 states that made the United States. And that document on paper only states that slavery shall be ended in the states of rebellion. You look up the states of rebellion, you get a list of the 13 or 14 countries that were in rebellion. If you were there as an enslaved person, according to Abraham Lincoln, only you were free. The rest of the slaves, Africans who were enslaved, in the other 30 countries, you remain a slave. Officially by the government of the United States under this president, whatever you want to call it.
The 13 states that was
in the states of rebellion.
In other words, for clarity purposes, it was nothing. It's a proclamation. It was just empty words. It was set up to bring other states back into the Union. That's why I never even talk about it. That proclamation was garbage. Because, and I'll tell you why. The fact of the matter is that if you control all the other states other than, I'll just give you the 11 that actually succeeded and the 2 that were borderline that just didn't officially succeed. North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, Florida, Virginia, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Those were the 11 that officially left. The other 2 that was on the borderline that never officially succeeded was Kentucky and Missouri. Now the reason why I'm saying that proclamation was garbage is because at the same time he issued that, were there any slaves in Philly?
Yeah.
Were there any slaves in New York?
Yeah.
Were there any slaves in New Jersey?
Yes.
Are these places, Massachusetts, these places that I'm mentioning, did Abraham Lincoln have power over them? Yes. How do you say no? Yes. He had power over them. Why did he free the slaves there? I want you to be clear. If that's what I'm saying, the words are empty. It's garbage. If you control Washington, D.C., if you control New Jersey, if you control New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Maine, you control all of them, you ain't free one damn slave. Them words are garbage.
Okay, now.
You're going to threaten the other states that you don't control. You threatening them to bring them back into the Union. So you say, you better come back in or I'm going to take your slaves, and in that process, I'm going to take your land. That's what he issued to those 11 states.
Okay, good.
That's what I'm saying is garbage.
Okay.
The proclamation. So out of that night, January 1st, of 1863, we had what's called watch night.
Yeah,
To this very day, do you know the black church does watch night?
yeah.
Now, it's all fun and games now. They don't go into the real history. But on that night, black people expected to be free. January 1st of 1863. Were we free?
No.
So that's garbage.
Okay, good, Doc.
According to the document that they let you see, those 11 or 12 states that were in state of rebellion, they formed a separate country,
Yes.
recognized by France and a few others. So technically, according to those 11 states, they formed the Confederation.
Confederate States of America.
That's right. So therefore, those states no longer legally was part of the United States. How could the President Lincoln, who's the President of the United States, dictate to those 13 colonies, the 11 states of rebellion, who are already a separate state? It's like the United States making rules for France, or China making rules. He had no legal international control over the states of rebellion. So he's freeing enslaved people in another country. That was another country, number one. The second thing is, any of the slaves that were able to leave those 11 colonies, they were held in imprisonment imprisonment, so that when those states return, they will be giving it back to them. So what we have to do is we have to review our history when it comes to the treatment of the government of the United States of America in terms of how it treated African people. They participated in the transatlantic slave trade. They maintained slavery up to 1885. So when you look at the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, the people who run it, you're still in the pocket.
So in
The
other
behavior
words,
is no change.
so in other words, the statement was garbage. It was just blowing wind.
He
It was
cannot-
garbage.
Those slaves,
So when you hear professors, you hear professors on the radio, you see them on TV, black ones, mind you, not even talking about the white ones, talking about the Emancipation Proclamation. Get a damn paddle and whip they behinds.
All right.
The next time you hear professors.
the people in Texas.
Because it was
Hold
garbage.
on, one at a time. Okay, Mike said it was garbage. You got one more thing to say, Doc? Go ahead and keep it quick.
The people, the African people who were enslaved in Texas, they call it, what's that Friday? Juneteenth.
Galveston.
You were a slave up until the time that the white the Northern Army marched in, white and black. That's when you got free. When you were physically freed by the Northern Army, it was a joke. Again, what we have to do is look. George Washington and the colonists didn't defeat anybody. If you look at the War of Independence, the war was between Britain, France, and the Hessian military. Because France was in the colonial war, a continental war with Britain and the others. They were fighting there. The French and the Germans came here, fought the British, and they beat the British that gave you your independence. The colonists didn't have cannons and bullets and stuff. Most of the history of this country, when you look at it, the people who run this country from the colonies to this day is no better or worse than apartheid or what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians when it comes to black people. So you can choose any one of the Democrats or Republicans if you want. But you better look at your history.
Okay, and I maintain with all you said,
We got a question.
with all you said, the proclamation was a piece of garbage.
Got it. Okay, Dan Avery.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One of them is political in nature. You know, I don't know how you guys feel about people I'm talking about, but Jamal Baldwin and Cori Bush political question is there a way to kind of countermand what the Jewish lobby has done by kind of like buying them out, you know, with money, with the challenges, primary challenges? That's the first question. Second question, maybe Ray, you can answer this. Did I miss that thing that I asked you about with some hotel with the NBA involved?
Okay, you could go on WBAI. Dr. Mack's program was yesterday, very good.
10 a.m.
10 a.m., we have to start remembering, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, Minefield. If you go on WBAI and you go into the archives and you type in Minefield, the program will come up for August the 6th, and you can get everything that Dr. Mack said on the program about the NBA, and I tried to say a little bit about it. But you can go on there and listen to the whole program on WBAI, and then you go on archives, Minefield, and listen to the repeat, and you can get it down. Mike, answer the second question.
Yeah, just want to say for the record that
I guess really what it is like running it.
I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just want to say for the record that there is a major stranglehold that Israel has on elected officials, especially black elected officials. They do not allow dissent among blacks because the state of Israel, most elected officials here in America are an honorary a part of the Israeli Knesset, their parliament. All right? Consequently, it is almost synonymous with being an American patriot with an Israeli ally. So it is literally almost un-American to speak out against the state of Israel. I could talk about Egypt all I want, and there would be no problem. If I told you 10 things wrong with Egypt, there would be no uproar. If I told you 10 things about Ghana that's not right, no uproar. But let me say one thing about Israel, and there's a problem. I'm somehow anti-Semitic. See, I'm not anti-Egypt, I'm not anti-Ghana, but if I say one thing about Israel, now Bowman is not my cup of tea, but he did say they should stop the senseless killing. They up to somehow, they admit to about 40,000 kills right now. About 40,000. He didn't say anything revolutionary. He ain't say anything progressive. He just said, stop the killing. Stop executing this war against Palestinians. Killing men, women, and children. That's all he said. But the thing he didn't realize is you don't have to say anything more than that. That's all you need to say. Any criticism of Israel, some punishment will be visited on you. The Irritated Genie has 2 books you need to read. Jews are the problem 1, Jews are the problem 2. You need to read that and get the information. The Nation of Islam has the secret relationship between blacks and Jews. The reason why the Jews are silent about the Nation's book is because all the information is from Jews. They're just writing down what Jews boasted about. When Jews boasted about things they've done to us, they put it in a book. They put it in editorials. They put it in all sorts of outlets where you can get that information. So if you say anything as an elected official, as a businessman, as a community activist, you are not allowed to say anything about Jews. You can say anything about literally anybody else you want to. You can condemn literally almost every country in the world with the exception of the state of Israel. Once you do that, you are now persona non grata. You now cross the Rubicon. And that's the facts, and no one can deny it. I challenge anybody to deny if you say anything. If Israel killed 1,000 people, 10,000 people tomorrow, and you say something about it, you are now a target.
Just in the 6 million people in the Congo.
Look, you are not allowed to say anything critical of the Holocaust. You are not, first of all, you're a black man. I'm a black man, there's all black people in here. I don't want anybody to come to me and say the Holocaust, because I'm going to say, what damn Holocaust are you talking about?
Which one?
I'm going to say, which one? What Holocaust are you talking about? You can't come to me and say the Holocaust, because I'm going to ask you which one you're talking about. If you ask me about the African Holocaust of enslavement, which is the largest Holocaust ever, that went on for centuries. I'm not talking about something that happened 5-6 years. Let's say, be generous, give them 10 years. That Holocaust in Germany. I'm talking about centuries where all these countries participated in it. That's the real Holocaust, and that's why we should get reparations. Yes, brother.
Okay, so the Democratic Party is party of slavery. The Republican Party is not really akin to the African American community. The African Americans are attached to the state of Israel, according to the lecture. But what is it then? We had a black president and absolutely nothing happened. What is the romance with the African American community and political organization in this country? Why are we still attached to this for some form of remedy while no one else is?
I would say that, and that's a good question, it's a fair question. I would just say that for the record, we always choose our own battles. You can't fight everybody everywhere all at the same time. So while we got to be strategic and have permanent interests, and in that regard, I would say that white supremacy might be white supremacy. However, black people who traditionally were Republican because it was a party of Lincoln has started to change under FDR, and then certainly in the years followed, capitalized by Kennedy Johnson, black people turned Democrat, and now you see a little shift, but I would say for the most part, most black people are are Democrats, and black people still look at you a little cross-eyed if you're a Republican, because the blacks that are in the Republican Party are so disgraceful. You know, they can't even stand up and be a man. And you should be a man before anything else. Be a black man. When you see Tim Scott saying America's not racist, hey, he looks so damn stupid saying that, and you get these other Republican butt lickers that's saying similar things. So much so that the ones that they have in their party, they're not upright. How could Tim Scott, who represents South Carolina, and see his next door neighbors in Georgia with the GOP will have you arrested if you are online to vote and you give this water to a person on that line, they can have you locked up. That's disgraceful. And Tim Scott can't find the words to say that's wrong. Tell the Republican Party you're wrong for doing that. You closed all the polling places where people can vote, and so these lines are so exaggerated. You standing there for hours and hours, and you know how hot it is in Georgia. So now you standing on the line, you give somebody a water, they can throw you off the line and they can arrest you. And so you trying to buy a vote. You know, so I'm just saying there's some basic things that black people find reprehensible in the Republican Party, and there's no excuse for it.
Okay,
To take people off the voting rolls is disgraceful, the way they do it. It goes way back to the way Bush did it in 2000, and that, crisis they had. So go ahead.
Okay, I guess
No. No, you.
I was gonna make a couple of comments.
If you got questions,
Let's go, we got the man.
okay, quick comments, quick comments.
When they're talking about voting, I think of Colin Powell and his invasion of Grenada. I think of Fred Hampton, who said,
Okay, it wasn't his invasion, it was the Bush administration.
right, but I'm also thinking of, when they think of eminent domain, we had Miss Butts, check out what they did with the slave theater and the judge's 26 blocks on Fulton Street that he owned. And also, we could talk about 228 Duffield, which was renamed Abolitionist Place. She fought and she kept her property. It's still.
No, she's the UN.
Shawnee, yeah. So, as long as we continue to fight, and we must, we will win.
Okay.
And it's not over till we
Get down.
three things I want you to
Free
consider.
the Panthers.
We as African people actually believe, in my opinion, that we are part of this. That's our first problem. We're not part of this. It is the United States government that fought against African independence. China, Russia, and Cuba, primarily Cuba, fought for African independence. Your government, Democrat, Republican, whatever you call it, they fought against your independence. So what makes you think, if they're killing you by the tens of thousands during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, your government, what makes you think they care about you? And the last thing I want to mention is how the white people consider you as part. I attended many years ago with my wife to an auditorium with WBAI and Cornell West and this white, I can't think of it. No, it was Cornell West, and it'll come to me.
He's running for president.
No, he's a comedian. He's a writer.
Noam Chomsky.
No, okay. See, anyhow, they were there. It'll come to me, and he said to Cornell West, 95% white people in the audience. Cornell West is okay. He says, I don't know how you African people, black people, you have among yourself, but I'm going to show you what we white people are in America with you. I'm going to ask one question, only white people to answer it. Why do we white people find it necessary to mistreat black people in America? The answer, none. 3 minutes later, he asked the question again. All white people, why do we find it necessary to mistreat black? They would never answer. So for me personally, when I hear that this government that I'm a citizen of, killing tens of thousands of people, fought against our independence, sat at the Berlin Conference, and mistreat you, you are captive. Trying to struggle. Just keep that in mind. Your strength is the continent. So you can vote for who you want. The people running this country and the average white listener don't give a damn about you.
And I'll just respond by just saying, for Cornel West to be such an intellect, why would he even ask that question?
No, Cornel West didn't answer it.
No, but I'm just saying, anybody of substance should never
Michael, it was Michael Moore.
ask the question.
Michael Moore.
That's
He wanted to illustrate to
Right,
us
because
how white people treat us.
Right,
As a
and,
group.
and I will tell you simply, and you know, with respect to time, it's always been a power question. We have been discouraged from voting with tyranny and violence. Violence has kept us from engaging in contracts. Violence has kept us from jobs, school, every opportunity under the sun. The bottom line that white folks have always used is violence. And that's one thing, that's their ace in the hole. Always been violence.
My
So
last quick comment is
That's it.
Malcolm on Palestine. Malcolm X on Palestine.
What is it?
My last, Malcolm X on Palestine. Zionist logic.
Okay.
The Zionist armies now occupy Palestine. He made this in the Egyptian Gazette. If y'all want to look it up, September 17, 1964. The Zionist armies now occupy Palestine, claim their ancient Jewish prophets predicted that in the last days of this world, their own God would raise them up, a Messiah, who would lead them to their promised land. And they would set up their own divine government in this newly gained land. This divine government would enable them to rule all other nations with a rod of iron.
But here's what, we will end this by saying they didn't wait for God, so the Israeli Defense Forces took the land for them.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Nice a great big hand. Two warriors, Brother Avery, thank you. Mikhail, McIntosh, thank you very much.
And what
This
did
will be
Dr. say?
there will be a continuation of the docu-series Whiteness in America. Give it my brother Mike. Give him a great big hand, and thank you very much.